Good morning, Santa Clarita. You're listening to your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. I am attorney Wade Skalsky, and this is Wade Beyond the Courtroom, where culture and law meet.
I like that.
I know, right?
Do you think this up in your car on the way over?
You know, sometimes I'm thinking it up as I'm just sitting here walking into the radio station, my friend.
Yeah, 2 minutes before the show starts.
That's right. Today was an unusual situation. I had a little late start this morning, and I thought I was going to miss the deadline to get on the air on time. I don't know what that's called other than being late.
Let me write this down. Wade, late on. Okay.
I was not late.
You're not late. You were on time.
But you know, I dangerously came close to having being pulled over by one of our fine Santa Clarita sheriffs.
Oh.
Yeah, I got the stink eye from a sheriff this morning.
Do you think if you told him you had a radio show to do, he'd cut you some slack?
Typically, my experiences and from reading police reports is that actually slows things way down.
Really?
So, yeah, so I don't think you would have seen me at all this morning.
Well, let's talk about being late for a second. Again, this morning you were on time.
I was on time, barely.
When an attorney walks into a courtroom late and everybody's waiting, how does that?
That's actually a really good question. So, so the mechanics of court are interesting. So it depends on the severity of the case, and it depends on the court. So, for instance, let's start with the most severe. Federal court, right, is the most strict court that there is. So when you walk into federal court, you better know exactly what it is that you're doing. You better know exactly how that judge runs his courtroom, and you better know, you better be on time.
Yeah.
Because they do not mess around in federal court. Versus the complete opposite, which is misdemeanor court, where you can basically walk in, you can call, almost all courts in misdemeanor court, you can say, hey, listen, you can shoot them a call and be like, I'm running late. And as long as you're there before like 11 o'clock, if court's at 8:30, as long as you're there before 11 o'clock, you're fine. So the only change on that is that if there's a jury trial or a motion or something that's going on, you got to know that so that you make it before that stuff goes. You still won't get in trouble. You'll just be sitting there all day. But the difference between misdemeanor court and federal court is if you walk into a misdemeanor court and you actually don't know something, you can ask one of the staff, right? And they'll actually give you an answer. Whereas if you go to federal court, most federal court bailiffs, clerks, even court reporters will look at you with disdain that you don't know what the answer to your question is.
Now, will they penalize you for being late? Is there a penalty?
Well, yes, there could be.
Because everyone's on the clock.
Right. You could be sanctioned if what would happen is that a judge would say, okay, we're going to have an order to show cause hearing why you were late. And then if for instance, your excuse was not good enough, then you could be sanctioned. So I've never seen that happen, and I've never heard of that happening in any courts that I've been associated with. I'm sure it has. Think of it, just like if you take 1,000 any job, I don't care, teachers, all right?
Yeah.
One of them is going to be a severe stick in the mud and not very nice to be around.
Right.
Right? At least one of them. Okay. So if judges are people too, and some of them are, there's a couple of them in LA County that are not happy, and I'm not going to say who they are, but privately I will tell you, and the defense bar, we talk about them quite a bit in terms of our disdain for their disdain for happiness.
And it's like with any job, you're expected to be on time.
Yeah. Yeah, but life happens. I mean, look, one thing for us is that we're going from court to court, so it's not as if I'm driving to the same location every day. One day I might be at airport court, the next day I might be at CCB, which is downtown, the next day I might be in Pomona. Tomorrow, however, I get to be one of our fine local courts, so I'm not going to be, I shouldn't be late tomorrow.
I keep thinking of that scene in My Cousin Vinny, where Joe Pesci shows up. He's dressed in like a leather jacket and just has no clue. Yeah, he's winging it. And he hopes he doesn't get sanctioned.
You see that sometimes.
Yeah,
I mean, look, sure. Lawyers are the same as you take 1,000 lawyers, and a few of us are. There's a cast of characters in the defense bar. We could do an entire show on the cast of characters in the defense bar and things that I've seen. But I mean, for the most part, there's a pretty level standard of civility and respect for the courts. But I can tell you is practicing over the last 18 years that from when I began, I think with the rest of our society, now I'm going to sound like an old fogey, like the rest of our society, back in my day, there has been a decrease in the respect for courts and authority, and a decrease for, I mean, you see people, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's crazy. Some of the we talked about this a while too, the attire and all that people would come to court with.
My wife works in the court system as well. You know that.
I do.
I won't say where or when or how, but I hear a lot of stories.
Yeah.
And there are some attorneys that are go-getters, and they're there and they're right there, and others they're they're nudges and just to, now. Can you see this first? Do that.
They're so what? They're nudges.
Nudges.
I don't know what that word means.
It's kind of like they're just very, very. I don't want to say entitlement, but it's kind of like they're just, can you see my case first? Can you do this? So it's really a balancing act.
Right. Well, there's nothing worse. So look, I have my own business, and so I'm going from court to court to court. So in one morning, I may do, the most you can do in a morning is from 8:30 to noon is 3 courts, really.
Yeah.
I've done 4, but it has to work, everything has to work perfectly, and they have to be really close to each other. But typically, you can do 3 courts, right? And there's nothing, so what happens is when you arrive in court, you put your file up and you say to the clerk, please put this up, I'm ready, after you've talked to the DA or the prosecutor, and then there's, you're in the queue then, so you have to wait. Now, most judges will take private attorneys first, but they'll take them in the order that they got the, so you're sitting there and you're waiting, and there's nothing more annoying than having an attorney like rush in after you've been there for like 15 minutes. You're just waiting patiently, and they go, Your Honor, can you call priority on this? And then, some judges will and some judges won't, but I think attorneys are just like everybody else where they think they're the only people in the universe. So when
we get back, you got a petition, I understand, or we're talking about petitions?
Well, there's 2 things. We're going to talk about your friend, the First Amendment again, and the right to petition, but we're also going to talk about, I'm going to petition your T-shirt. We're going to talk about your T-shirt a little bit. That's right. So you've been listening to Wade Beyond the Courtroom. I am attorney Wade Skalsky. This is AM 1220 KHTS.
And he was on time, folks, by the way.
Welcome back, Santa Clarita. You're listening to your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. I am attorney Wade Skalsky, and this is Wade Beyond the Courtroom. So, Mike, before we went to break, you brought it, you were like, you did the tease yourself. You're like, we're going to go to break, and then what are we going to talk about? I loved it. You took control there.
Well, it's your show.
Oh, no, it's our show.
Yeah, okay.
It's a collaborative effort.
It's a collaborative, yeah.
It was great. It was so smooth and seamless.
They call that synergy.
Synergy, right. Well, I want to talk about the synergy of your shirt. It always makes good radio to describe things that are happening in the studio that people can't see.
I bought it on a cruise.
On an Alaska cruise?
Actually, no. Where did I buy this? It was.
Was it a Mexico cruise?
No, it was actually a Canadian cruise. It was a cruise earlier in the year, or was it last year? It was last year. It was a reposition cruise from LA to Vancouver, BC.
You're just wearing a gray shirt that says Canada on it. Yeah, that's right. And I was thinking it would be pretty funny if you bought that Canadian shirt on a Mexican cruise. But
what if I bought it in like La Cañada?
Right.
And the LA fell off, and it was like a.
But you told me that you have some.
I am a quarter Canadian.
A quarter Canadian.
My granddad was from Ontario.
So you're only sorry a quarter of the time.
A quarter, yeah.
And when you drink beer, you only drink Molson a quarter of the time.
I love Molson, actually.
See, of course you do.
And we're not endorsing that, of course. But my granddad was from Ontario. He was he immigrated to the United States in the early 1900s. He was a police captain in Sacramento. And it's a funny story because he apparently was. I tried to find information about him online. It's very, very hard because it's back in the day and records weren't as good. But apparently, from what I've gathered, he was a captain in the police. I've got his badge. I've got his badge actually.
Wow, that's cool.
And apparently, he ratted out a superior who was caught up in a gambling scandal at a gambling hall in Sacramento. And I guess in those days, you didn't rat out your colleagues. So it was a whole city council thing and hearings and whatnot. But I think from what I can understand, I guess everything was dropped and dismissed. But
he's
got a history, which is.
It's what you would call a brouhaha.
Exactly. Never knew him, but I've got his badge, and then when I wear this shirt, I guess I can wear my quarter Canadian proudly.
Nice. Well, it's...
have you ever gone to Canada?
It's funny. So, do you know when you live in a place and then you never go to the sort of the tourist attractions of that place?
Sure.
Okay. Or you don't really go as much to nearby places?
Like living in Santa Clarita, not going to Six Flags.
Right, exactly.
Okay, okay.
Which I've been to Six Flags once in the 5 years I've lived.
You got to go.
I got to go.
Right,
I know. Maybe we'll go today.
Yeah.
No, but like when I went to law school in D.C., and so I never went to any of the monuments until, I went to them like once, and then I had been to them before, but whenever people would come visit, then you would go to, the monument. So the reason why this is relevant to your question, Mike, is because as we have talked about before on the show, I actually grew up in North Dakota.
Okay.
And so I can see Canada from my house.
Through your binoculars.
That's right, exactly. So that was
Is that like seeing Russia from Alaska?
That's right. You got it. You got my
you
Sarah
knew that
Palin
was coming,
joke.
yeah.
That's right. Okay, my Sarah Palin poll. And so what people don't know is that in the Dakotas, if there's anything cool, like if someone says, "Oh, you're from North Dakota," is this there? And if they say anything cool, that it's actually in South Dakota. So like Mount Rushmore, South Dakota. The Badlands, South Dakota. Deadwood, South Dakota. Sturgis Motorcycle Rally, South Dakota.
Wow.
The only thing that North Dakota has is the Peace Gardens. Have you ever heard of the Peace Gardens?
I've heard, not really familiar with it totally, but...
It's a garden.
Yeah, I know that.
And it's either on or close to the border of Canada.
Wow.
And the purpose of it is to commemorate the everlasting peace between the Canadian people and the United States.
Who takes care of the landscaping?
I'm sure it's a government. Okay. It's a government scenario.
Do they share? Or?
I don't know what they do. So
close.
But my point is that I have not gone to the Peace Gardens, nor have I ever been to Canada.
Canada's amazing.
Even though I lived next to Canada for 15 years.
Yeah, BC is just beautiful.
No, I've heard. I just lied to you. I just lied to you. I have been to Canada.
Where?
Last year, my wife and I went on the Alaskan cruise, and we stopped by Victoria.
Victoria.
Yeah, which was really cool.
Been there. Been to Victoria. Very provincial. I've been to their parliament. Watched them in session. It's very, very different.
Well, let's talk a little bit about parliament and maybe bring it back to the law today. What do you think? So sometimes in Wade Beyond the Courtroom, we like to talk about your friend, the First Amendment.
Yes.
And we've talked about, in here, we've talked about the freedom of speech. We've talked about the freedom of the press. We've talked about the misunderstood right to peaceably assemble. But what we haven't talked about yet in your friend, the First Amendment, is the right to petition the government. So the First Amendment reads, as I always enjoy reading it because I think it is an elegant document, reads, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right to people peacefully to assemble, and here we go, what we're talking about today, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So this is the whole concept is basically, in a nutshell, I'm upset and I want to ask the government for help. Okay. Now, to us, that seems obvious because for two reasons. One is that we have an extremely large government.
Yes.
All right? So there's always some governmental agency or something that's handling something.
Some would say too much government.
Correct. And that we could go to and that we could chat with. Yeah. Right? And then the second part is that we seem to have a lot of grievances in our culture today. Everyone seems to be upset about something, right? So, but I'm here to tell you today that it is our God-given right in the Constitution to be upset about something, Mike.
Okay.
That's right, the grievances, right? So anyway, so if you have a grievance, you have the right to petition the government. Now, this seems obvious to us, but back in the day in the colonials, they didn't have that right to petition the government. If you'll remember, with the right to assembly, there was this whole issue where you couldn't even assemble unless there was a representative of the government there, but there was no right where the government had to listen to you if you had a problem, and that's because there was a prince or a king that was handling the situation.
Right.
And so in those scenarios, the right to petition can be traced back to sort of the one of the origin documents of the Constitution, the Magna Carta. And in the Magna Carta, in the Bill of Rights the Bill of Rights in 1689 explicitly declared the right of the subjects to petition the king. And that was in the Magna Carta, which was a document that came forward in England, which was helping people basically to declare their rights with regards to these robber barons, blah 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 blah. But for us here in the colonials, the government was a colony, and so they just said, listen, you're just going to have to do whatever that we want you to do, and the king could do whatever they want. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that when we come back from the break. Mike, you've been listening to your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. I'm attorney Wade Skalsky, and this is Wade Beyond the Courtroom. You're listening to your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. I am attorney Wade Skalsky, and this is Wade Beyond the Courtroom, where law and culture meet.
Ta-da.
It's funny, every time we come back from the break, Johnny Cash is humming in that song. And you did a little hum once, and now I can never tell if it's you or Johnny Cash humming because your humming was so spot on. So, anyways, we were talking about, besides Mike being a quarter Canadian, also the freedom of petition with your friend, the First Amendment. So, back in the day when we were a colony, which was some time ago, I was told there'd be no math today, so I'm not going to tell you exactly how many years ago that was, but it was, over like 20, right? I think it was like 22 years ago we were a colony of England.
Sure.
Yeah, right.
I'll go with that.
Anyway, so one of the big problems, obviously, was the whole taxation without representation. So there were, the colonies didn't have any representation, in the English Parliament, so they had no way to have their voices heard. But they also not only did not have representation in the decisions that were made, they had no redress for any grievances that they had. They couldn't go to the king. They weren't British subjects. They were British subjects, but they weren't necessarily citizens in a way that could qualify to be able to have standing to go in front of the king. And then basically the monarchy could just tell them to go pound sand. They were effectively like children in your house, like kids aren't, when you're 10, you don't have any, you think you know everything, but you don't have any ability to influence your parents' decisions to move to states unknown for work or something. And then also too is that when you demand to be heard, they can ignore you and say, go to your room. That's effectively what the colonists were back in the day. So when they were rebelled, it was very important to them that the subjects in, the colonies were able to petition the government for grievances. It was really funny, like people used to just go right up into the White House and actually literally, they used to be able to walk into the White House and they used to be able to have a meeting with the president of the United States.
And it's the people's house, so
yeah.
In theory, that's, yeah.
I mean, now you can do a tour of the White House, but you cannot get on the president's schedule. But back in the day, you could. So people would literally travel to Washington. They would wait their turn. They would go in front of the president of the United States.
Can you imagine?
And they would be like, hey, I have this issue. So, like, the postmaster at our town is doing something or whatever. And so one of the president's duties was he would actually have to sit and talk to these people. Now, it's fair to say that the colonies, the disparity in terms of sort of political skill level back then, I think, was a little lower than it is now. Although I think some people would make an argument that maybe it was, in fact, the informed citizen was quite higher back then.
Different times.
Different times,
yeah.
Yes. There's just a lot less people. But there's a funny story where they would, I can't remember what president it was, so it's going to be a great sort of anecdotal story with little factual evidence to back it up. But there was I can't remember if it was Jackson or whatever, used to put a big block of cheese in the lobby because it was the people's house, and people would just come into the White House and get cheese.
Wow.
Yeah. And but anyway, so the reason why they did that, and they took that extremely seriously, was because of this whole concept of the right to petition the government, where they literally said, okay, we're interpreting this literally. And, I mean, like, look, and also, too, it was a different time in terms of communication. So, like now we have so many communication platforms. I think one interesting thing about the Republican debate was, I don't know if it had some giant share for, I think like 25 million people watched the debate, which shattered records or whatever.
Uh-huh.
But a lot of people actually watched it on Facebook and online.
Right.
And they were participating in the political process by sending in questions off of Facebook.
Sure.
And they were asked questions from people like you and me, just normal people, what they thought. And we have such access to be able to participate in the political process now. In California is a really good example. Agree or disagree, it is kind of pretty cool that we have the initiative system, the initiative ballot system here, where if you have an issue that you want the entire state to vote upon, you can get it on the ballot. Like,
exactly.
Mike, if you and I decided that we wanted Wade Beyond the Courtroom to be the official radio station of or radio show of California, we could do that. We could actually get a petition together and get it on the ballot. Should we do that, do you think?
Let's maybe form an exploratory committee. And find out about,
Is that you and me?
Well, you and me.
Is that going to be over a beer over here close by the Newhall Refinery?
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So,
shameless plug.
Would you sign my petition, Mike?
Of course I would.
Okay, cool. So, anyways, but that's the right to petition, and these are things that we take for granted in this country.
Yeah.
And it's not. It doesn't have to be that way. I shouldn't say everyone, but a lot of people, they think that they grow up in the United States, they enjoy these freedoms, and they think that this is normal. They think that it should be. It always is that way. It's always going to be that way, and it should be that way. And they don't understand why in other countries in the world why it's not that way. And it's one of the reasons, as I get fired up about the First Amendment, is because of all of the 5 freedoms that are protected there. And even though the size of the government bothers me, and even though I think that the government can be too intrusive in our lives sometimes, I am glad that we have the ability to, if there's a problem that I can't solve or that problem that my neighbors can't solve, that we can petition the government or in my business, the courts, for help.
Yeah.
Because it hasn't always been that way. It doesn't always have to be that way, and it's something that we have to cherish and protect. But that's at least my opinion. Maybe we should do a ballot initiative on Am I hurting my ballot chances for Wade Beyond the Courtroom being the official radio show?
Not yet.
That's a pretty conservative. I'm getting close to a conservative view there, and I know in California that's I think it's frowned upon. Anyway, we had a really interesting show today, Mike. I really enjoyed talking to you about your shirt, your friend, the First Amendment. You've been listening to your hometown station, AM 1220.
Can you be on time next week?
Yeah, I will. I promise. AM 1220 KHTS. Hey, I was on time today.
You were close.
AM 1220 KHTS. I am attorney Wade Skalsky, and this is Wade Beyond the Courtroom, where law and culture meet.